Welcome to our Mary Greeley Primetime Alive program, Preventing, Detecting, and Reporting Medicare Fraud. I am Vicki Newell, and I manage the Primetime Alive program here at Mary Greeley. As a reminder, if you need to sign up for other programs or you need to join or renew, you can go to mgmc.org/PTA. So our presenter today is Marlu Abarca. Marlu is a caseworker and outreach specialist at the Iowa Insurance Division. Through the state Senior Health Information Program and Senior Medicare Patrol, Marlu assists Medicare beneficiaries, their families, and caregivers to prevent, detect, and report healthcare fraud. Marlu has hosted cybersecurity and fraud prevention classes and events across Iowa since 2018, both in English and in Spanish. In November of last year, Marlu was awarded Fraud Prevention's Finest Award by the Administration for Community Living as an SMP team leader who consistently excels in the areas of casework, outreach, and partnership. Please welcome Marlu.
Hi, folks. Thank you so much. I'm going to try to turn the mic here so that folks that are joining us virtually can see me also. Like Vicki said, my name's Marlu. If you have any questions, want me to clarify something in the moment, you can raise your hand. Otherwise, I would appreciate to save the questions for last. So I'll give you a brief overview of SHIP and SMP. Some of you might already be familiar with the Senior Health Insurance Information Program. It focuses on general Medicare counseling and education. We actually have a SHIP counselor here today. Bob, will you raise your hand? Thank you. And then the Senior Medicare Patrol, which both of these are housed under the Iowa Insurance Division for the state, that focuses on Medicare fraud, errors, and abuse. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference between the three. So we are funded by the state using federal funds. So that's why if you ever get a call from me or you call SHIP SMP, you'll be reaching out to the Iowa Insurance Division. We have about 140 SHIP SMP sites across Iowa, and right now we're at about 89 of the 99 counties throughout the state. And each of those sites contains a network of healthcare professionals, but also Medicare experts. And in total, we have over 300 trained and certified volunteers. So who do we serve? We serve Medicare recipients, and most of you might know that most of the Medicare beneficiaries end up being 65 and older, but we also serve folks who are disabled, who may be filed for Social Security disability benefits. That also includes folks with end-stage renal disease and ALS. So in Iowa in total, we have about 630,000 beneficiaries and their caregivers and families that we serve. And when you think about Medicare and Medicare fraud, a lot of folks really, are really easy to think, well, that affects Medicare beneficiaries, sure. But in reality, it affects every one of us. Billions of dollars of taxpayer money are lost to improper claims each year. That's billions with a B. So it affects anyone in the U.S. that pays taxes. So because of the billions of dollars that are lost each year, the Medicare Trust Fund is actually at risk. It's something that's funded each year, but it can run out. So the way that it primarily affects folks is if you do receive Medicare benefits, the overall increase in cost that's lost to improper claims or to fraudulent claims can mean higher premiums. It could also mean that there's less money for needed benefits over time. So Medicare could stop covering certain things. And it could also mean that your quality of treatment goes down. And I'll give some specific examples as we go on. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference between fraud, errors, and abuse. When we talk about fraud, we talk about intentionality. So A fraudulent claim would be, for example, intentionally billing for services that were not received or billing for services at a higher rate than is allowed or is appropriate. And then abuse, an example would be supplying services or products that are medically necessary, that are not medically necessary or that do not meet professional standards. And I'll give a little case study in a moment that kind of highlights how that can happen and how it ends up being at times something that's systemic. And similar to errors, but unlike fraud, errors are unintentional mistakes and are not necessarily the result of physicians, providers, or suppliers trying to take advantage of Medicare. But if there are repeated errors, it might lead to sort of a broken system at a specific clinic. For example, recently we've actually been seeing a lot of reports at the state about balance billing. Is everyone familiar with balance billing? So balance billing would be Medicare says this service or this treatment is supposed to cost $100, but the provider providing that treatment or service is actually charging $200 for it. Well, they'll submit their claim to Medicare, and although Medicare says it's only appropriate to charge $100, the provider or supplier might try to recoup those lost $100 by billing the beneficiary, which is unlawful. So that is a form of abuse. So I talked a little bit about the consequences of Medicare at a national level. You know, we see the risk of depleting the Medicare trust fund, but individually at the micro level, you know, it can lead to medical identity theft. It does have a health impact, and it can lead to personal financial losses. So like in the case of the balance billing, some folks might not be as familiar with their rights, and that they might end up paying that bill that they get, even though they're not liable for that bill. In terms of your health impact, it can be taxing psychologically, mentally, to be a victim of fraud. So that has long-term implications for your health. And medical identity theft, I'll talk a little bit about the process for recovering from, particularly when your Medicare number is compromised, but that can also lead to a whole host of problems over time. So some examples of fraud and abuse that we've seen throughout the state, billing for services and supplies or equipment that were not provided. We actually saw a huge jump in this earlier this year due to some data breaches. There was a data breach at the University of Iowa Hospital. There was another one involving Aetna plans, if you're familiar with Aetna. And a lot of folks reported receiving COVID test kits that they did not order, and yet they were receiving claims for their Medicare, charging them for this test kit that they didn't order. Sometimes they would see the charge on their Medicare statement for the COVID test, but then they never received the COVID test. Another example is billing for excessive medical supplies. So there's a durable medical equipment, DME, scam that is long running, and we see it here in Iowa a lot. And there are times where folks will either legitimately through their doctor access or need a back brace, for example, or a knee brace. And they find a supplier that may not be as ethical, and they might end up charging exuberant amounts for that back brace that maybe would have been much cheaper at their local pharmacy, just as an example. Obtaining or giving a Medicare number for free services. We did see this during the beginning of the pandemic when folks were looking for COVID test sites. There were some fraudulent test sites that were exchanging test kits or the on-site test for their Medicare number. Improper coding to obtain a higher payment. This unfortunately happens a lot here in Iowa. The term is called upcoding. So with upcoding, a provider might charge a different code that would signify a higher payment from Medicare or higher reimbursement from Medicare for services that maybe didn't meet the qualifications. And most of the time when I see a upcoding case, it ends up being, a 5 to 10 minute consultation that gets coded as a 30 to 45 minute one, which would constitute a higher payment. But it is unlawful and is considered upcoding. Unneeded or excessive x-rays and lab tests. This is also something that has happened. It's not as common usually, but if you go to seek treatment or even consult with your doctor or another provider, please always review your medical statements, review your bills, make sure that what you're getting charged for and what's included on your claim is actually the service that you received. That's a good way to prevent this one. Claims for services that are not medically necessary. The durable medical equipment, that scam has so many iterations, but another iteration of that DME scam is, someone getting a call from someone claiming to be Medicare, and they get some health questions, and the person on the line is like, why would Medicare want to know if my knee hurts or something? And usually they end up asking for a Medicare number. They do all sorts of things to sound legitimate, and so maybe the beneficiary ends up providing their Medicare number. Well, they end up with a knee brace that costs maybe $2,000 to Medicare that someone could have gone at their pharmacy or with their own provider for much less. So that's another example. And then lastly, I can say thankfully this one's never occurred. I've never received this type of report, but using another person's Medicare number or letting someone else use your number. It is an example of fraud and abuse, but we haven't seen that one so far. So I mentioned this DME cases. The DME fraud has many variations, and it's an ongoing scam versus some other ones that kind of, we'll see some peaks depending on the time of the year or what legislation there is. So around the time back in May when the Biden administration announced the end of the health emergency, we saw a spike in those COVID test kit scams because suddenly these scammers realized they only had a small window of time before they could charge Medicare for COVID test kits. And it didn't matter if the person that they were sending it to actually needed it or actually requested one. If they acquired your Medicare number, you were going to receive a COVID test kit. So one that happens a lot is, beneficiary will get a phone call, and usually it pops up as a local number. And, when we see a local number, even if we don't have it saved or we don't recognize the caller ID, it makes us more likely to answer the phone, and scammers are counting on that. So this beneficiary, we'll call her Martha. She answers the phone, and she hears someone on the other line. It's kind of loud, maybe like there's a call center going on. And the caller says, "Hi, is this Martha?" And Martha responds, yes, it is. "Hi, Martha, I'm calling from Medicare. Have you received your new Medicare card?" Martha is very confused because she thought that the Medicare card that you get once you first qualify is the one that you keep for the remainder of the time that you're on Medicare. So this was a little confusing to her. She said, "Well, no, I haven't." "Oh, well, this one is plastic, and it actually has a chip. So, we'll make sure that you get it. Could you verify your Medicare number for me?" And, it just seems out of character that a federal agency, would be calling Martha, maybe for information that she assumed Medicare would already have because they assigned the Medicare number to her. So, red flags are going for Martha. And she says, how do I know that you actually work for Medicare? Well, this caller actually said, I will give you my Medicare employee number. Please write this down. After I spoke with Martha, I said, Martha, where were you going to verify that number? She says, I don't know, but in the moment it sounded legitimate, right? So, she writes down this Medicare employee number, and this caller starts asking her some health questions, like, do you have any back pain? Do you have any knee pain? Who doesn't? But she answers them, and it starts to feel funny, like, I don't think that Medicare would actually ask me these health questions. I don't think I should be answering these. So Martha hangs up. Now, a couple of weeks go by, and she continues to get these weird calls from local numbers, but as soon as she hears that it's something health-related or it's Medicare-related, she hangs up. Around this time is the time when Medicare was sending out the quarterly Medicare summary notice. How many of you receive a paper Medicare summary notice? Okay, great. You also have the option to receive it electronically, but my recommendation always is to create an account with Medicare.gov. You can look at all of your claims in real time on Medicare.gov, so you don't have to wait like Martha did for her Medicare summary notice every 3 months. So Martha ends up getting her Medicare summary notice, and she sees a charge for a back brace. She sees a charge for a knee brace. 2 days later, they both arrive. They are the flimsiest thing you can imagine. Definitely not worth the $2,000 that Medicare was charged for these two items, right? So what she does, she connects to her local SHIP counselor and says, hey, I got this weird call. They were asking me health questions. They said they were going to send me my new Medicare card. Let's contact the Senior Medicare Patrol. So then Marlu gets a phone call referral, and I spoke with Martha, and I let her know there's actually a technique that scammers use that's called caller ID spoofing. So when someone spoofs their phone number, they can make it look like any number, and unfortunately this is legal in the US to do. So there are apps that you can create your own number. Google has a service that you could create a Google number. So I let her know, hey, it's very likely that that number was spoofed and it wasn't actually someone local. Definitely Medicare would not call you to ask you for any personal information, especially not your Medicare number since they already have it. So what we did is that we ended up conferencing the two of us with Medicare. We reported what had happened, and we told them about the braces so that they could flag those as fraudulent. The reason why that's so important to flag those as fraudulent is because I'll tell you about a recent case that I received. There was a beneficiary who received a glucose monitor in the mail just completely randomly back in 2021. Well, at the time, I know that was the big scam during that part of the pandemic. People were getting these calls offering them a free glucose monitor if they would just verify their Medicare number. So the family kind of just threw it away and didn't do anything about it. At the time, the beneficiary and her family didn't have the habit of checking the Medicare summary notices, so they kind of just forgot about it. Well, we connected last week because now Medicare is denying them for a glucose monitor that she actually needs now. Why is that? Because Medicare only provides one glucose monitor every 5 years. So with Martha's case, it was important for us to flag that because say she actually got into an accident or hurt herself and she actually needed a legitimate back brace, she needed a legitimate knee brace, there's a chance that she would have gotten denied for those because Medicare had already paid thousands of dollars for some, right? So those are just the types of stories that I hear on a pretty regular basis. So I want to talk to you all about 3 steps that you can take to prevent healthcare fraud. Protect, detect, and report. What we want to do is we want to protect yourself and others from Medicare fraud. So please do treat your Medicare card like a credit card. A lot of folks don't realize this, but your Medicare card is as important as your Social Security card. It is your medical identity, and it's as valuable as a credit card, because if a scammer attains your Medicare number, they can just file claims, and it's like making purchases with a credit card. Please watch out for identity theft. You can reach out to your bank and see if they recommend a specific type of credit monitoring service. There are free ones out there. Your bank might offer one for free. Do be aware that Medicare doesn't call you and they don't visit with you to sell you anything. Medicare, just like any other government agency, like the IRS, isn't going to make outbound calls to you. If they have official business, they will send you a letter in the mail. They would return a call maybe if you have prior business and you've requested a phone call from someone, but otherwise, you can always expect that legitimate business will be conducted via mail. Do be cautious of these offers for free medical services. Another variation of the DME scam is someone saying, "Did you know that you have benefits that you're not using?" And what they do is you can technically access these really flimsy knee braces and back braces, and Medicare will pay for them. Sure, it's a benefit, but it's them abusing the system, and it could lead to a misdiagnosis in your future if that is in your medical record that you've used a back brace maybe or any type of brace. So please don't give out your Medicare number to anyone except your doctor or one of your trusted Medicare providers. And if you can help it, please do not carry your Medicare card unless it's to an appointment. So step 2, how do we detect Medicare fraud and abuse? For a while, Medicare was making available the My Healthcare trackers. And as far as I know, they're still considering whether they'll continue to print these. So unfortunately, I don't have one for you today. But one thing that you can do is that you can keep track of when you have a doctor's appointment. You can also make sure that you document what services you receive when you are at the doctor and what sort of things you get prescribed also. And then the biggest thing you can do is review your Medicare summary notices, your MSNs. If you have Medicare Advantage plans, they would come in the form of an EOB, an explanation of benefits. But what you want to look out for is those services that you didn't receive. The double billing, that might just be an error, administrative error on the part of your provider. So it's important to catch those so that either you or Medicare aren't getting double billed. And then also make sure that you watch out for services not ordered by your doctor. So my husband and I, we keep My Healthcare trackers, and they're extremely beneficial even if you are not a Medicare beneficiary. Last summer, we received a bill for like $230 some. And usually I'll just log into my Unity Point account once I see the bill, and I'll pay it. But I didn't recognize the charge because I hadn't had an appointment in a while, and neither had my husband. So I look at the line to see what the charge was for. And it had my husband's name, Anthony, and it said gynecology appointment. And my husband is a cis male, and I went to him and I said, "Babe, I don't want to make any assumptions, but did you see a gynecologist?" And he was like, right off the top of my head, "No, I did not." But he went to go grab his My Healthcare tracker, looked for the date that was listed on the bill, and said, "I didn't even have an appointment that day." So it made it so much easier for me when I called the billing department and said, "Hey, this is not ours. This is a mistake," and my husband would never go see a gynecologist. So it'll save you. So I'm a huge advocate for keeping track of your appointments and what services you receive. And like I said, you can always access your information and all your claims at Medicare.gov, which is also really helpful. Step 3, how do we report any suspected Medicare fraud and abuse? The first thing I tell folks is, thank you for calling me. Let's contact the provider and see if this is just a clerical error, right? We don't want to assume that everything on our bill that we don't recognize is fraud. It could very easily be an error and could be resolved by us just contacting your doctor or your clinic. And let's say that it actually is a charge not by a provider that you recognize. At that point, I want you to gather all of the information and documentation that you can. If they have sent you a bill, or if it's just listed on your Medicare summary notice, did you receive anything in the mail that you didn't order, like a back brace or maybe a COVID test kit? Note all of those things for me, and then that way when you get in contact with me, we know what information to give Medicare to make sure to flag that suspected fraudulent claim. So what were they again? Protect, detect, and report. Now, I'm one SMP caseworker. I am the only caseworker in the state that handles Medicare fraud, but we do have a network of SHIP counselors throughout the state that are familiar with some of these red flags that can easily offer some assistance. If you're interested in ever volunteering with the program, we have a few options for how you can get involved. So you can conduct presentations like this in your community, help beneficiaries protect, detect, and report. You can also provide one-on-one counseling. At the moment, we have 5 SMP specialists who are some of our very experienced SHIP counselors who now are handling some fraud casework. And I'm so thankful for it because there's so much, folks. There's so much fraud in our state. But also something as low-key as maybe administrative work. All of those things help the SMP program be successful in our state. So if you want to talk to me about some volunteer opportunities afterward, I'm available. So to get in contact with us, you can simply Google SHIP, and that's SHIP like the boat, but with 2 I's, SHIP Iowa, and that'll get you to our website. If you'd like to report suspected fraud or abuse specifically, you can call our toll-free number, and that's 1-800-351-4664. And then for any training or speakers, or if you'd like some materials, you can email SHIP with 2 I's at iid.iowa.gov. And I think we're gonna transition to questions at this moment. So what questions do you have for me?
And I want to say something quick. You talked about spoofing phone numbers. So what you guys know what that looks like in real life. We had one of our volunteers who actually had some type of appointment coming up at Mary Greeley get a phone call, and the caller ID said MGMC.
Wow.
So he answered it, and he was pretty quick to realize what was going on and questioned it. So he hung up and he called, and it was not us. So, and I do recall this happen. This has happened before. A few years back, I remember people saying, it says, my caller ID says it's from Mary Greeley. And, so it must be. And I, at that time, had to be, well, unfortunately, people can do that. They can make it look like it's coming from somebody that it's not actually coming from. So, and at that time, I do recall there was more than one case because I think they kind of hit an area and they try to until they get figured out. So I would be surprised if there weren't other cases here in our community as well. So
yeah, I've heard of a few, I want to say 3 people now who have been victims of the caller ID spoofing scam, where the caller ID comes up as their own name. So the scammer messed that one up, thankfully, and they just didn't answer it. But we've gotten reports about the caller ID showing their doctor's name or their clinic, so it's very common.
All right, question?
With all the fraud that's going on, what's being done to prosecute the providers and suppliers, and what kind of success rate do you have in conviction and recuperation?
It's a great question. So I alluded to the COVID test kit scam from earlier this year. So that was going on, kind of peaked at the end of March into late April. But we had seen it start since November of last year with the very first data breach here in Iowa. And then there was another data breach in February. So those kind of peaked. At that point, the OIG, who I report to, the Office of the Inspector General, that's who I report to at the federal level. At that point, they had estimated that it was about a $400 million scam. COVID is costing us, these COVID test kits are costing us, we know the estimate now is over $100 million. And that's just this year alone with that large scam that happened. In terms of prosecutions, they've already began. So they found out that there was one provider, just one, that was responsible for over $2 million of those COVID test kits. So this is still an ongoing investigation, but if you go online and you just search Medicare COVID scam OIG, you'll see the latest numbers and how many folks they've already prosecuted. But that was a good question.
And Marlu, I'm not sure if you said it, but when you were talking about these phone calls that people get, we've had somebody from Ames Police Department just come and talk about scams in general. You know, what they said, the best thing is just hang up and then call where they claim to be from and check on it yourself. And then some people were getting concerned about, well, somebody called me about this or that. And it's like, but you had called them first and said, hey, call me, I have some questions.
Right.
That's totally different, you initiating it, than somebody from out of the blue calling about a warranty or, you know, insurance or health, you know, whatever it might be. So, you know, to keep in mind,
If you initiated.
yes. And you know what? And I'm sorry to tell you guys are all very trusting people. I mean, you are. We are, you know, we all get to a certain age and you kind of, you know, you grew up and you could trust people. And the unfortunate thing is we're all learning. You have to be watching and checking and questioning. And that's not something any of us, I think we'd rather not have to do that, right? But unfortunately we do.
Yeah.
Mine was exactly the same question. And you really didn't answer the last part of that. So you said there were like $100 million worth of whatever, and this one person or company was $1 million. Or $2 million. That still leaves $98 million out there. And actually, how much does get recovered? I mean, it's your money. It's my money. And I mean, you went through 7 different things that are examples of fraud. I don't want to spend all of our money on detection and prevention either, but we've got to get some of this back or stop it. The best thing is just stop it.
Yeah. Sorry, I guess I missed that last portion of it, so thank you. What we know now, statistically, for every dollar that we invest in researching, investigating, and reporting Medicare fraud, we know that $7 gets put back into the Medicare Trust Fund. That's the statistic I know. I don't know. I know that might not be exactly the wording that you need, or like I can't give you a number. It's different every year, but we know that for every dollar we invest, 7 gets put back into the Medicare Trust Fund.
Right, and you have no clue. If it's been $1 million so far, they've gotten $7 million back out of $100 million.
Right.
So we don't, I'm sure it's probably a moving number. I think that's a very good question. And I think kind of to your point is that that's why we all need to be, because even who is Medicare? Who funds Medicare?
We all do.
We all do, right? Yeah. Right, we all do. So if we all do our part, all right.
And for me particularly, you know, I just turned 31 this summer. And I've been hearing for the better part of the last 15 years that Medicare was not going to be there for my generation, right? We learned during the third year of the pandemic that we had lost so many folks who were in the baby boomer generation that unfortunately that was the thing that extended the life of Medicare to cover every Gen Xer. I don't know about you, but I don't want that to be the reason that we keep Medicare alive. So we all need to do our part. If there's anything that you suspect, please report it. Inform your friends and family about these popular scams that you learned about today, but we all have a part to play, and I'm trying to do the best that I can because the way it's looking now, I'm not even going to benefit from Medicare, but if I can help it, I'm going to do everything that I can.
It's interesting, very interesting.
I'm assuming our Medicare numbers are on file at Mary Greeley and McFarland if we've been visiting, so we wouldn't need to provide them if we needed an emergency room. But if you're traveling and you're not supposed to carry your Medicare card, what happens when and let's say you travel by yourself. No one knows it, especially if you look young, that that you're on Medicare. I mean, how does the emergency in the different city get your number?
That's a good question. So it actually depends on what type of Medicare you have. If you have a Medicare Advantage plan, you can't even use Medicare outside of your county because that plan is very specific to the network and that's specific to your county.
Even for emergencies.
Even for emergencies. So that is a separate thing. In terms of if you are on original Medicare with Part A, Part B, then if you're traveling, you're covered throughout the entire United States and U.S. territories. So in that case, yes, it'd probably be a good idea to have it with you. Although if you have a Medicare.gov account, you can set one of your trusted family members or friends, your children, as representatives who can access that information in case you needed it. So you can say, hey, Bobby, I'm at the ER and they need my Medicare number. Can you please call and get it? If they're registered as a representative within your Medicare.gov account, then they can contact Medicare or they can access your account and look up your Medicare number for you. So that's one option.
I actually have two questions. The first one relates to carrying your Medicare card. We were told at one time that you make a photocopy of it and cross out certain portions of that card number. Now, obviously, a dedicated scammer can probably find those numbers, but a casual person couldn't. As long as you remember the numbers that are crossed out, then you're better. Okay, that's one solution. Now, the second question has to do with with a Washington Post, I believe, article on MA plans and the Department of Justice perhaps investigating these MA plans that were encouraging doctors to upcharge or to up the ante in terms of what procedures they provide in order to get a larger reimbursement from the government. Can you comment on the status of that investigation or what you know about it?
I can't comment on the status of the investigation because I'm not involved, and I probably wouldn't be able to share anyway. But you are able to search Medicare Advantage cost online, and what we're seeing is that there are a lot of studies that are coming out that are determining that Medicare Advantage plans actually cost the taxpayer more money than original Medicare, and that's for a few reasons. The one that we see the most at our office, because I'm one fraud caseworker, but we also have an appeals and enrollment issues caseworker who is just with SHIP. And what she ends up helping a lot of folks with is the fact that they get denied for a lot of procedures or treatments because they have an MA plan. And unfortunately, while we are in the process of appealing, the beneficiary might be getting sicker, might need longer hospital stays had they not been denied, the original treatment or service. So that's just one way that it's costing us more. I would say I haven't necessarily seen a causation. There could be a correlation between MA plans and how much doctors are charging those plans versus original Medicare, but I don't know the specifics.
One second, Bob. Let's get you. Yeah.
The article that I'm referring to, I think there was one in the Washington Post and one New York Times, but what I was referring to is that they were actually very legitimate insurance companies that were encouraging doctors to upcharge. And so, big time respected insurance companies that were doing this. And so the Department of Justice was investigating. I don't know what the status of that is, but just so you know that basically it's important to look at your even if you have an MA plan or whatever, look at what is being charged and make sure that it's legitimate.
Yes. Yep. The upcoding thing happens to everybody, and it happens a lot. So make sure that when you receive your Medicare statement or your explanation of benefits, you're checking with your provider or even calling Medicare and say, hey, this charge seems a little high for this service. Maybe it's just me. Can you verify that that is what Medicare pays for that service? And they'll verify that for you.
Somebody asked me, and I wondered if people would know, but you referenced and you said DME charges. Who knows what DME charges are? How about HME? Anybody know that? They're pretty much the same. Durable medical equipment, home medical equipment. So, walkers, canes, braces, toilet seat risers, all that kind of stuff. So if anybody else was wondering. A question I have, are you a proponent of, my husband and I have an app that's supposed to be private, I guess, that's called Folio. Okay. And when we traveled abroad, we could scan in our passports. And now there's a new one through the state that you can do your driver's license and it serves as your driver's license. But we've also put credit cards in there and some things like that. Are you a proponent of putting, because I think I have my health insurance card in there too, Medicare cards in there?
I'll tell you, there's no system that is foolproof or scammer proof. Anything is capable of being hacked. And sometimes it doesn't have to be at a systemic level or at the server level with a particular app, right? They don't have to hack into that company's computer or server to do that. When you click a link that maybe you get in a strange text from someone you don't recognize, or maybe when you click an ad on Facebook, you are by clicking that strange link, you are putting your phone at risk and anything that might be on there, including those apps that hold your precious, information. So just be very careful what you click. And I think you can have a little bit more, you can rely a little bit more on those apps. Yeah.
Okay.
My comment is probably more toward Mary Greeley and McFarland. It seems like it takes months to get the bill. We go to the doctor, and then we get the bill, and there's like 3 or 4 different columns: the charge, what Medicare pays, what the deduct, all these other things. So we're not sure who pays what. At least I'm not. And then there are always 3-letter acronyms for everything.
Yeah. And
if it's not that, it's medical jargon. To know really what we received for the OMB and the NTA and the TW what, it's, I don't know, and to remember 6 months ago.
So there's probably, that's not the area I work in, but I hear things and I know, there's certain things I know. A lot of times it's not us, it's insurance companies processing it. And insurance companies can come back to us like a year or two later and change and say, oh, we paid for all of this. Sorry, we didn't mean to do that. Here, you now owe us for this. So I think on our part, we have to do our due diligence to make sure everything's in, so we don't have those things happen. There's certain ways things have to be coded for insurance companies. So I don't know if that's why, but I think when you see something that says, this is what we charge, this is your insurance paid, and this is what you owe, that's usually your EOB from your insurance company, I believe. Explanation of benefits. Sorry, yes. No, absolutely. So I can relate it to when I'm down there doing stuff, trying to get ready for the program, and Tim comes in and says, "Oh, here, Vicki, turn the microphone on for the people online." I'm like, which button, when, and even though he's shown me how many times, I still, my brain doesn't work that way. And so I'm with you. I mean, most people's brain, and so what do you do then? You pay it, right? Because it comes and you think you got to pay it. So, ask those questions, call. I mean, you can call. There's a phone number on there. So call us and say, what was this for? What, I know that makes more work on your end. That's the only answer I have right now.
I'll add to that. This is something that everyone deals with, especially on Medicare, because Medicare allows providers to submit a bill up to 12 months after the date of service. So that definitely is inconvenient for a lot of folks who want to make sure that they're on top of bills, right? It might seem like a surprise later on, and then when you get it, it's too complicated in the moment, and then you pay it. You're less likely to investigate where this came from, and it also complicates things for people like me who investigate fraud because. Remember when I told you that the Biden administration ended the health emergency, right? That was on May 11th. Well, up until May 11th, the scammers technically have 12 months to submit those fraudulent claims. So it's likely that if you haven't received a COVID test kit or a bill for one this year, there's still a chance. So just make sure that you are diligent about checking your summary notices, about checking your explanation of benefits, your EOBs.
Oh, all of these things we have to keep on top of.
I've been receiving several breach of your data. And even though they're not medical, can they be tied into Medicare? Because your Social Security number is one of the things that they get when you have this breach.
Yeah, good question. So it definitely makes it easier for scammers to commit medical identity fraud if there's other aspects of your identity or your personal information that have already been breached. So let's say that they acquire your birth date, maybe your doctor's name. Well, they're just missing that Medicare number. So that's where the scam calls come in. They use some of that social engineering, kind of like the example I gave about Martha getting the Medicare employee ID number. That's a form of social engineering to kind of make you trust them. So that's why we have to be very, very careful and cautious when we get these phone calls. And I'll tell you, the best way to help prevent any contact with scammers is to just not answer the phone. And I realize that's not easy for everybody. You might have a business and that's your number for everything. But if you can help it, please let your calls go to voicemail. If it's important, they will leave you a message, or maybe they'll send you a text message if it's, a family member or something that couldn't get a hold of you. But when we receive those scam calls, it's actually a robocall that's just dialing our numbers. And when we answer, that's when we get connected to a live scammer, and then our number gets put on an active numbers list, and then that list gets sold over multiple times. Same thing when some of our data is compromised, it gets put on a list, and then it's sold to other scammers 15 times over. So when your Medicare number is compromised, those COVID test kits for us were a red flag, but when we went into their Medicare.gov account, and looked at the claims, we were seeing multiple like fraudulent claims and not just the ones for COVID. It's just that was the thing that alerted the beneficiary to look at their statements. So it does put you at more risk if you've had any other type of data that's been breached. Yeah.
I took the recorder for the voicemail off my landline, and I will answer the phone, but someone told me this trick that if no one answers right away, like my sisters will automatically start talking. If there is like a 1 or 2 second delay, it's usually a whatever that is, and I hang up.
Well, I've heard that if you're suspicious, that pick up the phone but don't say hello. Just sit there and wait until they initiate, because I think a lot of these, until they get a response, something's said.
Connect you with
But I like the idea better of just don't answer. I know you don't have a voicemail anymore, but when's the last time you got a voicemail at home that you really wanted anyway? So and on my phone, I don't know about all of you, I think it might be through my carrier, but when a phone number comes up, it will say potential spam.
Yes.
And I just leave it, or I just hang up.
Yeah.
Should I hang up, or is that telling them somebody is there? Should I just let it ring?
Nope. You can do
Just
either.
hang up.
But going back to my story about Martha, when she answered the phone, they said, "Is this Martha?" And she said, "Yes." What they also want to do is record you saying yes, because if you later try to contest any charges, well, they can go back and say, "Actually, we have you agreeing to receive this service or product." So just avoid talking to anyone from a phone number that you do not recognize.
And the policeman that came and talked to, not about medical fraud, but other kinds of fraud, said the exact same thing. They're asking you something to get you to say yes and record you.
Yep.
Some of you would already have call blocker on your phone, and there for
Bob
okay.
does not.
That's not who I want. I just canceled that. But if you have call blocker, that's one good way of blocking out future calls, because if they don't get a hold of you, they might call you back 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. 9 times. Now, just to let you know how pervasive this is, I got 15 text or email messages while I was here. Okay, 3 of them are spam or phishing. So 3 of them I'm not going to answer.
And never click on a link in any email you're not expecting.
Yes.
As I'm walking up there, Tim, are there any questions from online? Okay, we still have some in here.
So when you were talking about, the first person you should contact if there was like a question kind of thing, and you said the provider. So, okay, let's say it was an appointment that you had at McFarland.
Okay.
So do you call McFarland billing department? Do you call the actual department that you went to? Because, are they more likely to code it? Or, it's like, okay, I had an appointment for a doctor, and my doctor wasn't going to be there, but they still kept the appointment because they said another doctor would fill in. And then I was told that it was going to be like a PA. But then when I actually saw the bill, then it was for a doctor, not a PA. So I looked at it and I was like, so who do I call? Do I call the department, or do you just call, because is billing going to know? Well, I don't know.
It's easier to answer if you live in a smaller community where you could easily speak to like your doctor's nurse or the provider directly and say, "Hey, here's my issue with this bill. I think this is the wrong code. I actually saw this person instead." They can correct it that way. It does get a little bit more complicated when it's a larger system. I've never had to deal with billing at Mary Greenlee, but the billing department would be a good place to start.
Yeah, I was going to say, if it's something at Mary Greeley, I wouldn't call the unit, because all they do is whatever they click and select and whatever care they provide for you, that generates the reports that go to billing, and then, right, at McFarland, but at Mary Greeley, as we're talking, I would definitely call billing. I think if it was me and calling McFarland, I'd probably call the billing department.
Yeah, that's my recommendation.
And if it's not right, they're going to send you to where you need to go.
And normally, so let's say that it's something like, you saw one provider, but it's a charge for someone that has more experience or a different title that maybe they got to charge more for that. Make sure that you reach out to the billing department, let them know what the issue is. And if they need to adjust the bill with Medicare, go ahead and call Medicare and let them know that you're in contact with the billing department, because Medicare will give them 45 days to correct it. And if they don't, they'll get in trouble. And if they give you any trouble in general, they're maybe not receptive, that's when you can call me, and then we'll put the pressure on them to correct that bill.
Just so I could look and sound.
Did you have a follow-up with that?
I just had a comment again. I guess I sort of took it as the PA was in consultation with the doctor that they put on the bill.
Okay, so the concern is
So I
that,
sort of felt like, that's how I approached it, was they had permission and this other doctor had looked it over or whatever.
so, and what was your name?
Oh, Jean.
Jean. So Jean commented, her thought was maybe the bill reflected the doctor's name because they were maybe they were supervising that PA that Jean saw. That's not how the billing works, unfortunately. The person who is providing the service, there's a specific code for that person because of their level of training. So a PA is very different from a medical doctor, and so they're allowed to charge differently. Yeah, that's a good example of upcoding, and it could be an error. They won't know until you raise awareness about it.
We have, I think you may have said, but Bob is one of our SHIP counselors here at Mary Greeley. So not only do they meet with people who are getting ready to go on Medicare to better understand their options, they meet with people because we have Part D open enrollment, prescription drug coverage coming up October 15th to December 7th. It is very important every year to review your plan, because last year's plan may not be the best one for you this year. If you're not comfortable with doing that yourself, you can make an appointment through our office. I can tell you we fill up. So if you are interested, our number is 239-24. That's Primetime Alive. I can't think of the SHIP number. Actually, if I just give you 239-2210, that will get you to our office and Danielle, and she would be able to help you if you're interested in that. But you also meet with people who are disputing, don't you, or have questions or concerns about their Medicare or what they're being charged or what they're being required to pay, correct?
Correct. We meet with people with regard to billing questions. They may have legitimate billing questions. It may be just a legitimate bill, but we can investigate some things of that nature.
All right. Any other questions? Very good questions. I'm learning a lot today. All right. Well, Marlou, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Lots of really good information, and lots of good information we all shouldn't keep to ourselves, right? We need to share this with our friends and family members and remind them to, double check and make sure things are accurate, and warn them about the scams and things like that are going on. So thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. Want to remind you, next week we actually have another Medicare program. Welcome to Medicare, and that is Bob. who we talked about is a SHIP counselor. Two of his counselors that work with him, Bruce Johnson and Joan Grabenstetter, are giving the program. And it's for, even though it says welcome to Medicare, it's not just for people getting ready to go on Medicare. It might be if you have some questions, and they'll talk about the prescription drug coverage, open enrollment, and all that. So a great time. Are you coming next week too, Bob? No. Oh, no. Okay, well, those two will be there, and I know there's at least one or two other SHIP counselors that are going to come as well. So if after the program you have questions, some of them will be around to be able to answer some questions for you as well. That's next Tuesday, October 3rd at 2 p.m. And then Thursday, October 12th, 2 p.m., we have a program on The Power Is Yours, Nutrition and Exercise to Reduce Breast Cancer Risk. And you can sign up for those again online, mgmc.org/PTA. And just want to put a little bug in your ear that in October, Wednesday, October 18th, is the Story County Senior Expo. It's going to be back out at the Gateway Hotel, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Lots of great information about services available in our community for older adults, education programs, giveaways, lots of wonderful information. So I hope you can join us out there. So thank you for coming in, everyone. Thank you for joining us online. And thanks again, Marlu. And have a great day, everyone.